Okay, I think we could begin now. So things will work a little differently for our reorganization meeting. I'll be conducting the meeting at the beginning until we elect the president. So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and everybody could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Let me get my flag up here. Come on. All right. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Okay. Adequate notice of this meeting has been sent to all members of the Board of Education and to the Bergen Record in accordance with the provisions of the Open Meetings Act, Chapter 231, 1975. At this time, I'm just going to give although I usually receive the certified election results, I know things are a little different this year, but I talked to Mr. Lidico at the town. I went to the Bergen County Election Office website, and I think I have the final numbers, and I'm going to read off the 6 candidates in order. We have Kelly Mahoney with 2,846 votes, Sylvia Zottarelli with 2,801 votes, Richard Shearer, 2,554 votes, Regina Borelli, 2,032 votes, Victoria Torbic, 1,877, and Haley Traverso, 1,709. So with that, we have Kelly Mahoney, Sylvia Zottarelli, and Richard Shearer will be our 3 board members that I'll be giving the oath of office to. If you want to join with your family, unmute yourself. I'll give you the oath. I'll say a few words and lines. You repeat them back to me.
Come here, quick. Let me get the family, please go in.
Come right here. Sit here. Nobody can see you. Come sit here.
Nanny has her camera off.
Cool. Okay, Richie's got his comment. Kelly's good.
We're good.
Sylvia, no?
We're good. We're good.
We're good? All right.
Cece's here. We're good.
Okay, everybody ready? So here we go. All right, here we go. I state your name.
I, Sylvia
I,
Zottarelli,
Kelly Mahoney,
I, Rich Shear,
Do solemnly swear
do
do solemnly
do
swear
solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the
the
Constitution
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the
the
Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith
and
And
that
I will
I will
and I will
bear true
bear
faith
true faith
and allegiance to the same
and
and
allegiance
allegiance to the
to
same
the same,
and to the governments established
and to the
to
governments
the governments
established
established
in the United States and this state
in the
in the
United
United
States and this state
and this state
under the authority of the people,
under the
under
under the authority
people.
of the people,
so help me God.
So help me
to
God.
help me God.
I, please state your name,
I,
I, Kelly
I,
Mahoney,
Rich
Zottarelli,
do solemnly swear
do
do
solemnly
Do
swear
solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications
that
that
I
I
that I
possess the
possess the
qualifications
qualification
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of
for the
for the office of
member of a Board of Education,
member of a
Member
Board
member
of Education,
of a Board of Education,
and that I am not disqualified as a voter
and that I
and
am
I am
not qualified as a
qualified
voter
as a voter
as a voter
pursuant to revised statute 19-4-1
pursuant
pursuant to
Pursuant
statute
to
19-4-1,
19-1,
nor disqualified due to
nor
nor
disqualified
disqualified
due
due to
conviction of a crime or offense
conviction of a
conviction
crime or
or
of a
offense
crime or offense
listed in Jersey statute
listed in New Jersey
listed
statute
in Jersey statute
18A 12-1
18A 12-1,
12-1.
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will
And that I will faithfully,
impartially, and justly
impartially, and
impartially, and
justly
unjustly
perform all duties of that office
perform
all
all
duties
all
of that
duties of that
office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of
according
my
to the
ability.
best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me
So
So
God.
help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to call the roll call now. So Ms. Raccomando,
Present.
Ms. Ainello,
Present.
Mr. Lorentino,
Present. Whoa.
Ms. Mahoney,
Present.
Mr. Quinn,
Present.
Ms. Robinson,
Here,
Ms. Roloff,
Here.
Mr. Shearer,
Present.
Ms. Zottarelli.
Here.
Okay, the next item will be, let me just, for the public, under bylaw 0152, the board will now select one of their members to be president. What happens here is I'll open up the floor for nominations. A board member just has to nominate a name of another board member. No second is needed. Once I take all the names and we're done nominating, I will close the nominations, then we'll take a vote for each member as they were called out. So at this time, I'll open up the floor to accept nominations for board president.
I'd like to nominate Kelly Mahoney.
Any other nominations? Seeing none, I'm going to close the floor and we'll take a vote for Kelly Mahoney as board president. I'm going to go in order here. Mr. Raccomando,
Yes.
Ms. Ainello,
Yes.
Mr. Lorentino,
Yes.
Ms. Mahoney.
Yes.
I always like that one. Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes,
Ms. Roloff,
Yes.
Mr. Shearer,
Yes.
Ms. Zottarelli.
Yes.
Congratulations,
now.
Ms. Mahoney.
Thank you so much.
And I turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, now we'll go through the same process for vice president. So I'd like to open the floor to accept nominations for vice president. And I will start by nominating Michelle Roloff. Do we have any other nominations for VP? Okay, seeing none, we'll close nominations. And Mr. Karati?
Okay, Mr. Raccomando, this is for Michelle Roloff as vice president. Mr. Raccomando,
Yes.
Ms. Ainello,
Yes.
Mr. Lorentino,
Yes.
Ms. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
yes,
Ms. Roloff,
Can I think about this again? Yes.
Mr. Shearer,
Yes.
Ms. Zottarelli.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Through the chair. I would just like to congratulate Kelly and Michelle on their new positions within the board. I wish you well and know you're going to do a great job over the next year. And thank you for stepping up and doing this for the board.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, now we're going to go to some board action items. There are two. So at the recommendation of the superintendent, I make a motion to approve the following items. We have B110 to adopt all the existing policies and regulations, and B111 to adopt the board meeting calendar for 2021 and 2022 reorg meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
And do we have any discussion, questions?
I have a couple, just a question. Let me just pull it up, hold on. So I think October 11th is Columbus Day. Is that okay to have a meeting that day? I don't know if, we normally don't have school on that day. I'm just curious.
Well, Columbus Day is often a PD day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we've had in the past as well. We've had board meetings on Columbus Day.
Okay. Just was curious.
Yeah, it's
That's
okay.
all. Okay, so, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
So most
All
of
right.
it was standard. I think I, wrote a few items in the an email to the board. I added that December meeting because we've needed it. What was the other one? The other one is August. Everybody okay with the August? And we could always modify these. We could always cancel them, change the time, but
Yeah, I may be on vacation that week. I had to change my vacation. Hopefully I will be on vacation. So I'm just saying, I don't know if I'll be there. And Columbus Day is my birthday. So I'm just giving you a couple of heads up here.
And on vacation, have your computer with you because we're still going to be doing this by
You
then.
think so? By October? No.
Oh, I hope
God,
not,
no,
but-
please.
As
Yes,
long as
but I
we get-
actually could participate by Zoom if I had to, right? If I'm not here. You have
Through
to
the
talk
chair.
about that,
I think
right?
you did
All
that with
depends
us
on
already
where we're
one
at.
time.
Through the chair. Is the August 23rd meeting still going to be the same type of meeting that we've typically had at the beginning of the day for board goals and district goals, et cetera?
It would be nice if we could check with our New Jersey School Boards Association representative to see if he's available that day. We'll call him.
We'll arrange that. I said we
We
could
will.
change the time. If we could get everybody to meet earlier that day, and have one of the administrators, probably like we've done in the past. Maybe we don't have to start that early, but that we can modify. I just wanted to get the date on the calendar.
I twitched my nose and he's here.
Okay, so the idea is that it will be around that time and then we'll have the open public meeting on August 25th, at least at this point.
Yeah, we could
So-
revisit it as we close out the year, maybe in June. We can look at it, see everybody's summer schedule and solidify it then.
Thank you.
Well, I happen to know your New Jersey School Board's rep, and his son is getting married on August 22nd, so he won't be available on the 23rd.
So make it
I
the
think we
week
might want to look
before.
at that before June then.
Please congratulate him for
Yay.
us.
You certainly don't look old enough to have a son who's getting married, but
My daughter's already married.
Oh, wow.
All right, any other discussion?
So we'll go with this and we'll look to modify it as maybe in at the January meeting or February, we'll look at the summer dates again. We'll get dates from Matt and go from there. I need to get this in and post in the newspaper because the January meetings are coming up. So
That's fine. I just wanted to
yeah,
clarify.
no problem. Okay,
All right, then I guess it's roll call, please.
sure. Mr. Accomando,
Sorry, I couldn't find any. Yes.
Ms. Ianello,
Yes.
Mr. Laurentino,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Roloff,
Yes.
Mr. Shearer,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Zattarelli,
Yes.
Ms. Mahoney.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a couple of personnel items. At the recommendation of the superintendent, I make a motion to approve the following items. P871 and P872, some new appointments.
Second?
You. Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Sure, Mr. Accomando,
Yes.
Ms. Ianello,
Yes.
Mr. Laurentino,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Roloff,
Yes.
Mr. Shearer,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Zattarelli.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you want me to vote too?
Oh, sorry, Ms.
Mr.
Mahoney.
Karati? Yes,
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I'm out of order on my roll call sheet now. I got to make new ones.
Gotcha. All right, do we have any old business? All right. New business, board committees. I think this is the time when I'm supposed to ask you guys to let me know what committees you would like to be on this year. So if you could email me and then I will, we'll have that for the January board meetings. Okay, I think the two most important are budget and finance and policies. Negotiations is also in there, and then the rest are of the whole. So that's the plan.
I'll forward
All
a
right.
list to Ms. Mahoney. The list is also on our website under the Board of Education. You could go, check that out as well.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Karati.
Sure, I just had two items just to tell the board or the public. So for the mandated training, board's required to take mandated training based on your year in office, and all the board members that are required to take mandated training for the 2020 calendar year, all that was completed. So congratulations to the board members. We got that done. I think that's a QSAC item. It's great to have it done. The training also is very good for the board members as well. Mr. Lee is going to be going through the ethics training. There's a sheet to sign at the end. You don't have to do it right away. You can get it back to me because I'll be giving also the 3 board members who took the oath of office tonight the oath of office sheet to sign to print it out and get it back to me. But again, they're not like urgent. Do it by tonight or tomorrow. So just to let you know that, and that's all my items. Thank you.
Mr. Karati, on those sheets that we have to sign, can we just sign them, scan them, and email them back to you, or do you need the hard copies?
Yeah, you could scan them back. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Then I think at this time we are opening the meeting to the public. So residents are requested to, do I need a motion to open to the public first and then read?
Motion.
Do the motion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Residents are requested to state their names, addresses, and subject matter. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 45 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 5 minutes duration. Issues raised by members of the public may or may not be responded to by the board. All comments will be considered and a response will be forthcoming if and when appropriate. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding students and employees of the board are discouraged and will not be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of the legal rights of those affected or identified in their comments, and be aware that they are legally responsible and liable for their comments. If you would like to speak tonight, you can use at the bottom of the participants, there's a raise hand icon. Would anyone like to address the board? Okay,
I don't see any hands up right now.
okay.
Doesn't look like. Nope.
Okay. Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the meeting to the public?
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And I realized I forgot to all in favor for opening the meeting, but okay. All right, and now I believe it is time to turn the reins over to Mr. Matt Lee for our ethics training workshop. It's all you, Matt.
So for the book, just by Matt, before you go, I'm going to turn the hosting over to you so you get your slides up. But for the public, yeah, this is an ethics training workshop for the Board of Ed. You're welcome to stay in here. It's actually some good material there to see what the board can and can't do. So with that, I'll turn over to Mr. Lee as soon as I make him host. Okay, you should have it now, Matt.
Yep, I have it. Thank you. Okay, everybody should be able to see that, I hope.
Yes.
Congratulations to Kelly and Michelle. Looking forward to another great year with my friends in Saddlebrook. Okay, annual ethics training. You guys have been very diligent about keeping up with this every year. I just wanted to let you know that the presentation does get updated on an annual basis. We have the new cases that were considered in 2020 within the presentation. The foundation of it, of course, is the Code of Ethics, which we'll go through quickly. I know you all have been through it many times, and it doesn't really lend itself in a Zoom environment to have you guys read pieces of it. So I'm just going to go through those pieces quickly myself. Certainly, if there's any questions as we go along, shout them out. And there are a couple areas in here where I'll be asking for folks' input or, sort of your opinion of what happened within a particular case. And, if we could have your mics at the ready for answering those questions, that'd be helpful. And my last piece is that from time to time when I'm doing Zoom, I do run into some audio problems, and if that's the case, please let me know. I have another microphone and headset that I can switch to if I need to. Volume okay right now? Okay, great.
Yes, very good.
All right, excellent, thank you. So as always, we'll begin with the history behind the School Ethics Act and what it is that it was meant to do. And we know that the statute itself was passed in April of 1992. And its intent was that they wanted to ensure that board members' conduct and that of the local administrators would hold the respect and the confidence of the people. And that board members need to avoid conduct in violation of the public trust or something which creates a justifiable impression among the public that such trust is being violated. The key takeaway there is your conduct is always on display for the public when you're acting in your board capacity, and sometimes when you're not. So it's important to display to the public that everything is being conducted in an ethical manner in terms of board business. And in order to help boards comply with the Code of Ethics, the legislature called on the state to create specific standards to help guide conduct, and also a disciplinary mechanism to ensure that those conduct standards are maintained. And that is where the Code of Ethics itself comes from, and also from which the School Ethics Commission emanates. And we'll talk a bit about both of those things as we go forward. Also, a side note to that, the Act does apply to charter schools in terms of their trustees and administrators as well, because as you know, they also use public funds to run their districts. Most of you all are familiar with the state monitoring program known as CUSAC. And you do know that there's a governance piece of the CUSAC monitoring process, which speaks to your behavior and your compliance with all of the ethical requirements of being a board member. And this review, for one in specific, does help you comply with that. You see in the blue box at the top that the Board of Education is required to annually discuss the School Ethics Act. And also, in order to achieve all of your points on the governance indicators in CUSAC, you must not have had anyone found in violation of the School Ethics Act. So what are the things that came about when the School Ethics Act was established? First, as we talked about before, the School Ethics Commission as a method of enforcement and monitoring of school administrators and board officials' behavior. The Code of Ethics itself, which was the guidance that we talked about a little bit earlier. It established what conflicts of interest may exist for board members in conducting their business. It established a requirement for the personal financial statements that you all have to fill out each year, in which you state where it is that you get your income and whether or not you may have any conflicting interests with the district's financial activities. And then finally, the training requirements for board members, which Mr. Karate alluded to just a little bit earlier. And of course, you are all in compliance with that, which is great. When we talk about the mandated training, those of you who have been around for a while know that in the first term that you serve each year, you are required to do one piece of the mandated training. And the chart here shows that in the first year, you are given essentially what is known as the skills and knowledge necessary to serve. And it also touches on CUSAC and the Chief School Administrator review process, which of course is an important responsibility of every Board of Education to oversee the performance of the superintendent. In years 2 and 3 of your first term, you will do what's known as Governance 2 and Governance 3. Respectively, they are about financial picture of the district and also about student achievement. The next piece is in the first year of every subsequent term that you may be elected to and serve in, you must have Governance 4, which is a review of the latest updates in terms of school law and any other appropriate information that has taken place in the prior year. And then also harassment, intimidation, and bullying training is part of your first year training, but that is only required once in the initial training and updated in Governance 4. So the School Ethics Commission, what does that look like? Well, there are 9 members on the School Ethics Commission when it is fully staffed, and that is not always the case, unfortunately. The members are appointed by the governor for a 3-year term, with no more than 5 from any one political party. The composition is always 5 non-school officials, 2 school administrators, and 2 school board members. And we're going to see what they do and why it's important that the Ethics Commission is staffed. So the SEC's function is to basically work toward 2 outcomes, the first being an advisory opinion and the second being rulings on ethics complaints. Advisory opinions are where a school official can request whether or not any proposed activity or conduct by themselves or another school official would constitute a violation of the act. And we see in that little side note at the bottom there of the first block that it is important that the School Ethics Commission stay as fully staffed as possible, because the advisory opinions need 6 votes from the SEC in order to be made public and to be able to provide guidance to other school officials around the state. So again, important to keep as many people on that active as possible. Ethics complaints. When the School Ethics Commission considers ethics complaints, these are allegations, if you will, that have been put forward against conduct that has already taken place. And it's an alleged violation of specific pieces of the School Ethics Act and or the Code of Ethics. These are not anonymous complaints, but one of the big differences here, as opposed to an advisory opinion, is ethics complaints can be filed by anyone, a member of the public, board member against board member, staff member against a board member, etc. And those, if you are found to have violated the act, you can be assessed a penalty by the commissioner. Now, the penalties are progressive in nature. or at least they become more serious as you encounter more serious violations. Starting on the right, you can see that the first level, if you will, is a reprimand. And that is a private letter that you would get from the commissioner that says your conduct violated the code, and you should refrain from conduct like that in the future. The next level up in terms of penalty is a censure. Now, this again is a rebuke to you personally, but is also a public rebuke. And it is accompanied by a resolution that is adopted by your board that acknowledges the infraction that was committed. And again, a very sort of public exercise that accentuates the fact that this was a more serious violation of the act. The next two in order are suspension. And that again is for an even more serious infraction of the code. The length is recommended by the SCC, but finally decided by the commissioner. And once again, there is a formal resolution adopted by your board acknowledging that infraction. And the last level you see in the red on the right-hand side of the slide is removal. And that would be removal from your position on the board for the remaining length of your term. Just to be clear, the SCC makes a recommendation to the commissioner for final decision, and appeals to this may be held by the appellate division. So what happened in 2020? So we have basically a by the numbers kind of picture of how the SCC conducted its business in 2020. There were 21 advisory opinions drafted, one advisory opinion that was made public. We had mandatory training violations. We talked about mandatory a couple times already. In this case, 8 members across the state were removed for not complying with the mandatory training requirements. There were 4 members who were suspended for a period of 30 days, and then 10 members reprimanded. And then finally on the right, you see school ethics violations. There were 28 brought to the SCC, 24 of which were dismissed, and 4 cases were recommended to the commissioner. And we'll talk a little bit about each of them as we go forward. Here's the advisory opinion that was made public by the SCC in 2020. In this case, a superintendent's sister-in-law, brother's wife, was a lunch aide in the district and was hired into the district before the superintendent was. And this person was recommended by principals as a finalist for secretarial position. The superintendent reached out to the SCC and asked if it was a fair thing to prevent this person from, who was an otherwise qualified and vetted employee, to move into another role merely because of their relationship to the superintendent. The SCC advised that that would be a problem relative to the code. And it is because that the public could reasonably perceive this action was getting an unwarranted privilege or advantage or employment, basically because of their relationship with the superintendent. And they further emphasized that the superintendent in this case needs to recuse himself from any discussion on any of the sister-in-law's employment as a lunch aide. So that was the advisory opinion from 2020. So the next group of slides are the actual code of ethics. I know you all have a copy of them on the acknowledgement form that you were given by Mr. Karate prior to the meeting. Just want to emphasize that the piece at the bottom of each of these slides are the standards. And what we mean by that is that when the SCC is considering whether or not there's a violation of a particular tenet of the code, those standards below each of the tenets are the language that they use to determine whether or not you've committed a violation. So nothing that we have to go through item by item tonight, but I think it is helpful to understand what it is that the SCC would actually consider in those cases. So I'm going to kind of breeze through the code of ethics now. Being as we've gone through it a number of times, I won't spend too much time on each slide, but I do want to make sure that we address each tenet as we go forward. So tenet A is I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. Tenet B, I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. And what that's meant to convey, of course, is that, you know, while you may have been brought to the board by some very specific concerns within the district, you know, maybe they're about the music program or athletics, or, you know, you have a certain, you know, concern with science or STEM or something like that. Once you do get seated on the board, the scope of your interest has to expand beyond what originally brought you to the board, and you have to be concerned with every aspect of the district and all children, regardless of any distinguishing characteristics. C, I will combine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. This, of course, is where we encounter all of our four main duties of boards of education members: policy, planning, appraisal, and communication. D, I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they were well run. This is the first of a number of times where the code really addresses the fact that boards are not part of the day-to-day management of the schools, but rather have a general policy-making duty and also a duty to oversee how things are done, but not to insert themselves into the actual operations. E, I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board. I think it's clear here that the instruction is that board members as single entities really have no authority within the district. It's only when sitting with the rest of the board in a legally advertised meeting that board members have any authority to take any action. And it also, of course, in the second part of this, instructs board members that they need to be careful with any action that they may take individually that may compromise the board.
Matt,
F, yes,
can I ask a question on that previous slide?
absolutely.
Okay, I know that no board member is supposed to take any action, but sometimes people get confused with an outsider, a parent, or staff member, whatever, just speaking to you. Is that somebody coming to you with a complaint? Is that considered unethical? I mean, I don't think so, but you're not making any promises. You're just listening and bringing it back to the board.
Sure. You know, it's always our advice that if someone comes up to you, you have to recognize that most people are not familiar with the roles and responsibilities of a board member. And it's perfectly okay for you to, you know, listen to whatever the complaint might be. Where you come into, you know, issues with your responsibilities is if you are, you know, suggesting that there's something that you can individually do about that to rectify the situation. The proper course, of course, is to recommend that this person engage themselves in the chain of command, to begin with wherever, whichever staff member is closest to the initial problem, and then allow that, that process for resolution to proceed up the chain until it reaches the superintendent, and to stay out of it until it may be presented to you for final resolution. And that's only in the case of some kind of failure of an administrative solution to the problem. And should you become involved in that beforehand, you've essentially compromised your ability to render an impartial decision when it does reach the board as a whole for some kind of resolution. So I hope that answers your question, Sylvia.
Thank you, yes.
Okay. So F, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups, or to use the school for personal gain or for the gain of friends. Again, this is emphasizing a board member's responsibility to bring nonpartisan judgment to the board and to not allow outside influences to affect your decision-making process. And also cautions you against trying to use your position as a school official to help out family or friends in any way, shape, or form. Tenet G, I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to schools, which if disclosed would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school. The first part of this, which is obviously incredibly important, is staying within the confidentiality that is part of the executive session format within a board meeting. The reason that things are eligible for executive session is because there could be some kind of damage realized if those matters were discussed publicly. And board members have to respect the fact that unless they are communicating with other board members who are sworn to uphold this code, they are putting that at jeopardy. So, no discussion of executive session materials with anybody outside the board, aside from your board attorney. And that includes any relatives, spouse, friends, etc. And then certainly, when it is incumbent upon the board to make some kind of public statements about what is going on the board, they need to provide accurate information, and both ways as well, both from the community to the administration and from the administration to the community. H, I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the chief administrative officer. Again, this speaks to the fact that the superintendent is really the person in charge of the personnel function in the district. The board's role there in the hiring process is really just to approve the hire from the perspective of, did we know that our hiring policies were followed? Did our chief school administrator apply the policies correctly and vet the candidates as they should? And then, of course, whether or not the hire makes sense from the perspective of the educational goals that have been laid out by the board. And of course, that there's the proper budget resources to bring that person into the district. I will support and protect school personnel and proper performance of their duties. Again, this speaks to the fact of, board members don't want to be seen in public criticizing members of the school district. When they're executing their roles in a lawful and ethical way, board members should be ready to protect them from any kind of negative feedback. And then finally, J, I will refer all complaints to the chief administrative officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution. And really, this is almost exactly what we talked about earlier relative to Sylvia's question, working with the chain of command and making sure that board members stay impartial until they are brought into the situation. So Scc Commissioner Decisions in 2020. You guys are familiar with this format that we typically use when we do our presentations. So As you know, these are commissioner decisions, so we know that there has been some kind of infraction of the code at this point. Just wondering what you guys think about the pieces of the code that may have been violated, and also what you think the penalty was assessed for each of these. So I'll read the first one out to you. A board member employed as a teacher in another district failed to disclose income received as president of that district's education association. So you all know that if you're a board member and your financial disclosure forms are filled out improperly, that's a problem, right? So in this case, certainly that did not happen correctly. So just wondering what you thought the penalty might have been for this. Remember, we have reprimand, censure.
A
Sorry, was
reprimand?
that,
A
was that
reprimand?
you, Angela?
No, that was Sylvia, but I was going to say reprimand also.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's see. That was a censure.
Ooh.
And they're finding here that they violated the statute as opposed to violating a tenet of the code, right? Because if you remember back a few slides, we said violating the School Ethics Act or the Code of Ethics. So in this case, it was a School Ethics Act. Next case is a teacher who's a parent sent an email to the full board about the superintendent's handling of an incident. A board member intending to email the board used reply all so that the parent teacher also received the email that included the details of the board's executive session discussion of the incident. What do we think would have happened in a situation like that?
I'm thinking censure only for the fact that it had all that confidential information. If it was just a reply all, I would have said a censure. But it seems like
Okay.
if there's some meeting, there could be a problem.
All right, let's see what they said. Only a reprimand. And I would have sort of leaned toward what you said, Vincent, but as I've said a number of times before, it's a really difficult thing to try and understand, especially from, you know, short synopses like we offer in this presentation, exactly what the details were and why they went in that direction. But as you can see here, this person was found guilty of violating tenet G of the code and also violating the Open Public Meetings Act.
Matt?
Yeah.
Quick question going back to the first one.
Yep.
In that type of situation, if the board member became employed, say, and was retaining money from the Education Association after filing the Financial Disclosure Act, does that become mute, or are they also responsible for updating it in that situation?
You know what? That's a really good question, Steve. And my sense is that this is essentially a snapshot each year, which would mean that, you know, on the day you fill this out, what was your status? So if your status changed in the course of the year, it wouldn't become apparent until you filled out a new disclosure form.
Okay, so there is no rules or a system to update once it's filed.
I don't believe so. I've not heard of that.
Yeah, I think it's
I can
on
double
the year. I think there's a
Sorry,
year
Ray?
on the disclosure statement that you're filing for that year.
Yep,
Thank you.
you got it.
Matt, may I ask a question on that?
Mary, I got you.
Yes, it's Marty. Hi. If I read that correctly, the board member was a teacher, part of the teacher association, who did not disclose her payment for that, correct?
Yep, the money that came from the Education Association, right?
Okay. How did the SEC find out that they didn't disclose that?
Well, if I had to guess, somebody dropped a dime on them.
But
The
that's
filing is a
kind of-
public
I
document.
don't understand how someone would know that what they wrote on their form, that they didn't disclose that. So I feel like there would be some kind of backward.
The forms are public information.
Okay, that's where
You
we're
can
going.
Google
Okay.
them.
All right, that's
Yeah.
right. I forgot that point or didn't know that point actually. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
Wait, Matt, I have a question on that too.
Yes.
How does a president, I didn't realize that president of an education association gets income. What income could they receive?
I don't have any idea.
Okay.
They
I
could be
suppose
paid,
there's some kind of stipend for
yeah,
the
they could be
duties that
paid
they
by their
perform.
association sometimes. They make it in their bylaws.
I don't know for all, I could just speak for my own. We in the association pay our dues and part of it, we give the president a stipend from it. So it's coming from the association. It's not the district. We
Right.
pay for that, the members of the association.
Mhm.
So we give our president a stipend that she actually in my district, the whole board gets it. So at the end of the year, they get a stipend and it's X amount of dollars for each person depending on their position. So I don't know if other districts do that way, if that's a stand, I just know my particular one does.
My district
I'm
does it
not
as
sure
well.
if it's a standard.
Rich, you said your district does it as well?
Yeah, I know from just members telling me that they do it as well. It's one of the
Okay, so
benefits
I
to being on the board.
So I would assume it's an NJEA, like if you attend their meetings and they would tell you to set up your board and all of those things. So
Yes.
Don't you think somebody would be 1099 for that?
You
When you
do
get
have to do paperwork for that.
Yeah, so you would think that there's some tax trail. Right? I mean,
At the end of the year, you have to do a report with the IRS with your local. And in that, you have to put that, like you said, as a 1099.
yeah, okay.
And the NJEA as a, I guess, in good faith, if you have your books correctly,
Right.
they give you an additional $250 to put into your kitty.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so here's a good one. A board member posted content on a blog that contained deliberate, repeated, and unnecessary attacks of the qualifications, salary, and general employment of a tenured teacher in the district. This isn't, this is from 2019, actually, so it's not included in our statistics from 2020, but we thought it was important to include. What are our impressions there?
well, her salary, this person's salary is public knowledge, so I don't think anything would be done on that. Said to that, it's a board member.
I don't think that they're implying is they identified the salary. I think they're probably saying they got paid too much.
Oh, okay.
Did they?
I don't know.
Reprimand.
Reprimand from Sylvia.
Yeah, me
Here we
too,
go.
reprimand.
Yeah.
Oh my.
This is a
gosh.
6-month
I think it would be a little
suspension.
bit more than that.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Duh.
So you can see that there are 3 different tenets were violated. So they're holding that the gross misrepresentations in the post were meant to interfere with negotiations, right?
Ah,
And framed policies and plans of the board before the board consulted those who would be affected by them. Also, the board member smearing and verbally attacking a staff member in a publicly accessible forum. This diminishes the board's integrity. So we go back to that personal conduct that may compromise the board. And then the last piece is harm the staff member's ability to properly teach and perform obligations. So not defending your employees. Interesting, board member argued his rights as a private citizen and the required disclaimer was used that he was not speaking on behalf of the board. You guys all remember that when you do, for instance, write a letter to the editor or post something online, which we advise you not to do, you're supposed to identify yourself as a board member and say you're speaking just personally. In this case, it was held that his status as a board member was referenced a number of different times, so it was not convincing that he was speaking as a private citizen. So even if you do drop that disclaimer in there, you can still get yourself in trouble depending on the nature of your comments. And that's why we kind of advise everybody that social media is really just it's a tough place for a board member to be and do it the right way. So don't do it. Yes.
On that subject, and I know it's a slippery slope, if a board member was to post something and identify that they're not speaking as a board member, as a taxpayer, as a resident, as a citizen, whatever you want to identify, but under your comments, people start mentioning the fact that you're a board member or you as a board member should know X, Y, Z, whatever, does that come into play of being unethical?
You know, so this goes back to, it's kind of hard to guess what direction the SEC goes in some instances. My instinct there, of course, would be that you didn't control the comments. So it would be tough to kind of hang some penalty on you for that. But you never know. You never know. And once again, that's one of the good reasons to stay off of social media. If you want to, you know, post a picture of your puppy or something like that, you probably can't get in trouble. Or your recipe for tomato basil soup. But, you know, when you start to get into the public domain and start to talk about, you know, public issues, you know, as you mentioned, it is a slippery slope, or can be. Oops. So the commissioner revoked the district's send-receive relationship with an out-of-state district. So identifying an in-state district to instead receive the district students. This decision impacts the board president's child. The president then participates in actions that result in the passing of a board resolution to continue the relationship with the out-of-state district with tuition to be paid by the district. And clearly a blatant disregard of the commissioner's decision. I don't think they're happy with that when you do that, right? And then clear and palpable conflict of interest. So what do we think the outcome is there?
Suspension.
Hopefully removal, but quite possibly suspension.
All right. Just a censure.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
So screwed up.
So in this case, you can see from the notes after there, the penalty was a censure, but the member was then off the board. So the options to assess penalties were limited. You couldn't suspend somebody or remove them because they're already off the board. The SEC said they would have recommended removal. And apparently that one is still being considered by the commissioner.
That makes a little bit of difference when he's no longer on the board.
Yeah, it's tough to assess a penalty in that case, sure. A board member attended an all expenses paid conference offered by a potential vendor that the member introduced to the district based on a pre-existing relationship. You may recognize this. Been in the papers. It's local.
It wasn't me, Matt.
Are you sure?
Or Mike?
All expenses paid conference offered by potential vendor.
Been going on for a couple of years now.
Interesting.
Well,
You
then
gonna tell us the district, or we have to look it up?
It's all on the links on the last page.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be doing that.
Okay.
I'm gonna go censure. This has been going on for a while, so it can't be suspension or removal.
I'm going to say reprimand.
I was also thinking reprimand, but
So there's a suspension.
Wow.
So you see the three pieces of the code that were violated. So taking action unrelated to duties. We talked about the fact that Tenet C outlines what your duties are as a board member, and clearly, you know, evaluating vendors is not one of those. And you know, certainly taking gifts or favors from a potential vendor is a problem as well. And then finally, using the position to gain benefit for yourself, a free out-of-state trip. So the SEC's recommendation was removal to deter other school officials from accepting gifts. That was reduced to a suspension. My understanding is the board member appealed to be able to stay on the board while this appeal was being heard, and that was denied. So the board member is not on his or her board now. Okay, quick quiz. There's a board resolution to approve the hiring of the architecture firm that you work for. Can you participate in the vote?
Nope.
Nope, that's a no. All right, let's talk a little bit about conflicts of interest. You guys are pretty familiar with this already. So you need to recuse yourself. There's a benefit to you as a school official or your immediate family due to any of the things we have listed in this chart, which generally talk about undue favors or benefits and or some kind of business interest or financial involvement that intersects with that of the board or the district. In this case, there is no discussion or no vote on any of these items should you have some kind of a conflict. And then, as we've discussed before, the SEC in rendering its decisions sometimes uses slightly different standards to evaluate a situation. And you can see in this case, we're talking about the SEC definition of immediate family, which is in statute and is defined as a spouse or a dependent child residing in the same household. So that's what your immediate family looks like to them. Now, when we talk about who qualifies as a relative, that has become a much more expansive list. And you can see in this case, the standard we're using comes out of New Jersey Code, and it is what's known as the accountability regulation definition of a relative. And you can see in the boxes there, it really goes quite a ways and is pretty expansive from the actual board member. And if you look at the asterisk note at the bottom of the slide, this is whether related to the school official or their spouse or partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So pretty big list of what might constitute a relative when evaluating your conflicts.
Now, this is just for everybody's info. This is up to the board member to self-enforce, correct? I mean, the board can't say, well, your son-in-law is involved, you can't vote. It's actually up to the board member. So if they choose to ignore that, the only recourse would actually be to file ethics violation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. As you know, a board cannot discipline its own members. That is a right that is reserved for the School Ethics Commission, and through the Ethics Commission, or through, emanates in the end from the commissioner, and it's implemented through the School Ethics Commission. The only exception to that, of course, is that if board members miss 3 consecutive meetings, the board can act to remove a member. Couple other scenarios. So the district has an opening for guidance counselor. It would be a perfect job for your nephew who lives 2 towns away. Can the district hire your nephew?
Oh, and no.
Mostly you're right, you can't. But we have talked about the exception in the past, and the exception is if the district has conducted an exhaustive search for a staff member, usually in a very sort of narrow and specific discipline, let's just say a Latin teacher, and you can prove that your search was comprehensive, but did not yield a good candidate, and you do know of a good candidate who happens to have some kind of a relationship to an administrator or board member, you can appeal to the executive county superintendent and have that person hired. But in the main, no, that's not a possible thing to do for the board. Board is meeting to discuss the superintendent's performance evaluation. Your spouse is an aide in the district. Can you participate in just the discussion?
No.
No.
No, you can't. Absolutely. Okay. Hiring. So we talked about already, you can't hire the relative of a school board member or chief school administrator, and we talked about the exceptions as well. If you have a relative who already works in the district, right? Because that can happen. You can have a spouse or a child who's a staff member and get yourself elected to the board. If that happens, then you may not take part in any discussion about that person's employment and or anybody in the chain of command from that person all the way up through the superintendent. And part and parcel of that is an administrator who, happens to be hired into the district where a relative works, can't exercise any direct or indirect authority over that person. And the board member who is related to somebody in the district can't take part in any CSA management, if you will, activities, such as the evaluation of a superintendent, discussion of personnel matters involving the superintendent, and or searches for a superintendent, whether that be things as minor as defining criteria or selecting a search firm, or even discussing what the ad might look like if you were out to hire a superintendent. And that extends all the way up through post-hire evaluation and contracts. So board is voting to approve the memorandum of agreement with the local education association. You are a teacher in another district. Can you participate in the vote? Well,
No, unless
let's
there's
move to the next.
I believe you can participate in the vote, but you cannot have anything to do with the discussion.
That is correct. And this is one of those situations where the SEC has become more lenient over the last few years. The citation you see up here at the top is a reference to an advisory opinion, that's the A, from 2017. And this chart reads with the left-hand column describing the relationship to the board member, whether that be themselves or a spouse or a child. The next column outlines whether this is a current member of a statewide public teachers union, whether or not they can participate in negotiations, and whether they can vote to ratify the contract. So in the first row, you see spouse, dependent child, a child who's not dependent, or a relative who works in the district. It's a no all the way across. If you have a self, a spouse, or dependent child who works out of district but is in the statewide public teachers union, you may not participate in negotiations, but since this advisory, you may participate in the voting once all of the details of the contract have been agreed to and memorialized. You can then be briefed as a member and vote on the contracts. This is absent any other conflict, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. And then the last row is a child who's not a dependent or a relative who works out of district. You may now participate in negotiations and you may vote to ratify the contract, again, absent another conflict. So what does that other conflict look like? Well, typically the one that would be, the most common disqualifier would be having that immediate family member or relative with heightened union involvement in their district. So they're on their negotiating team, they are a building rep, or they are an officer in the local union. That would be one that would disqualify you more than likely. As with every conflict situation, we highly encourage you to run that by your board attorney to get their opinion on it and, follow their advice. A1810, another advisory opinion from 2018, stated that endorsement of a candidate by a local or statewide union doesn't create a per se future conflict unless a financial contribution is given and is intended to influence a member. In this case, this is, again, a little bit more relaxed approach to this. It used to be that if you were endorsed by the local union, you would refrain from negotiation activities for the first year of your term. Now, that doesn't really exist unless this condition is met, financial contribution is given, and is intended to influence, although, I mean, it's hard to tell what, the influence intent might be, so. Doctrine of necessity, we've talked about this before as well. Basically, this comes into play if a board doesn't have enough unconflicted members in order to do a required vote. In this case, you would publicly state your conflicts, post them for a period of time, and then invoke the doctrine at a meeting, and then you could all participate in discussion and voting on this particular issue. Volunteerism, school board members are not banned from volunteering schools, but they have to, make several important considerations. They can volunteer and they can hold executive positions all the way up to president of the PTA because it's an outside organization. There are some PTAs apparently that are part of the school district. And in that case would be a different matter, but any outside organization you can be a part of as a board member. But if there are activities that or considerations that come before the board related to that organization, board members need to recuse themselves from discussion or voting. Relative to volunteerism, board members need to refrain from activities based on their degree of involvement with students and staff, and the degree to which the school board member might have authority to give or receive directions to and from students or staff. If they are in a position where they're able to do that, they're probably in the wrong place and shouldn't be volunteering in that case. And of course, we always advise board members who are going to be in the schools for any reason whatsoever to give their superintendent a heads up and say, I'm going to be in the school, I'm going to be in there for X activity, and once X activity is over, depart the schools. Don't, start to move around to other parts of the building or, asking questions, engaging staff members, etc. That's not your role when you're a board member. This is just kind of a handy chart that helps you evaluate potential activities that you might want to engage in. And if your answers coincide with the answers that we have here next to each of these questions, if you answer them just the way they are there, you're probably okay. If your answers are different from any of these, then you probably need to have a discussion with your superintendent and your board attorney about that activity you plan to do. Interview committees, again, we're looking at 2 advisory opinions from 2012 and then 2015. This is a classic example of how over time the School Ethics Commission can change its feeling on certain issues. In AO4-12, it talks about the fact that if board members are going to be involved in interview committees, that is at the request, if you will, of the administrator, chief school administrator, and their participation is limited to observation and assessment. It should be clear that the CSA and the CSA alone gets to make personnel recommendations for hire by the board. Just 3 years later, in 2015, on the same subject, they went a little bit further and got a little bit tighter with this and said that board member involvement in interviews for positions other than that of superintendent is not encouraged. Now, we all know that a board's only employee is the superintendent. The board has 1 employee. Everybody else works for the superintendent. So in this case, what they're saying is that that's where you should refine any of your interview activities to the hiring of a superintendent. They do say that if the superintendent were to reach out once again and say, I'd like your opinion on, this group of candidates, they may bring 1 or 2 board members in, and they should follow the direction outlined in AO4-12. Any questions? Nope, okay. Just to wrap up real quick, we talked about lists of conflicts, and that's something that board members should review periodically. Usually the business administrator might keep a list of those conflicts, but it does pay on a regular basis to just take stock of, what your conflicts could be. And if you have any question, get an opinion from your board attorney about what that might be and whether you have any restrictions. Your board attorney should be the final word on those kinds of things, and certainly can be a source for information on any ethical issues that you may have questions of. And then lastly, we do publish advisory opinions and cases in school board notes. So it's a real good way to keep up on ethical issues throughout the course of the year. Here's the closing piece, again from an advisory opinion, which says school officials must always be cognizant of their responsibility to protect the public trust, to honor their obligation to serve the interests of the public and board, and to periodically reevaluate the existence of potential conflicts. Last piece, these are all of the links to the NJDOE site and the cases that we discussed in there. So if you do have some quarantine time you want to kill and you want to jump on and look at some cases, they're all there for you. They're public information. I'm going to stop sharing now and ask you all if you have any other questions, comments. Okay, excellent. Good to see you all again. Best of luck to you this year. I'm sure we'll be crossing paths, certainly virtually, but I hope in person in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Good luck,
Matt.
everyone. Stay healthy.
Great
Matt,
job
before you
once
go-
again, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you
Matt,
very
before you
much,
go,
Matt.
just
Have a
turn
great
the
new
host
year.
over to me.
Thank you all. Take care now.
Matt, just turn the host over to me.
Yeah, how do I do that, Ray?
Go on my videos, the three dots on my video.
I got you. Yep.
Thank you.
Make hosts.
All right, thanks a lot, Matt.
You're
Thank
good.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, I think now we just have one more board action item to vote on.
Correct.
So that is B112, and that is the Board of Education members have the required Board of Ethics training session as required under NJAC 6313 and NJAC 6A30. Resolved, the New Jersey School Boards Association Code of Ethics shall be considered the official code of ethics of the Saddlebrook Board of Education. So I make a motion to approve that action item.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call? Do you have to roll call?
Mr. Raccomando,
Yes.
Ms. Ianello,
Yes.
Mr. Laurentino,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Roloff,
Yes.
Mr. Shearer,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Otterelli,
Yes.
and Ms. Mahoney.
Yes. And I believe that is it. Is that it?
Yes.
All right, then I guess I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in another week or two, right? Is it next week?
January, what is it, 18th?
18th, I believe it is.
18th. Okay.
Are we going to be,
Congratulations, everybody.
are we going to be
Congratulations.
Zoom on the 18th, or are we shooting for live?
Think we're-
Zoom.
Zoom.
We're zooming.
Thank you all very much. Have a great new year. Excellent job with your first meeting, Ms. Mahoney.
Very nicely
Thanks so
done.
much.
Thank you.